Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 939 is a bill to repeal two different code sections. The first code section dates to 1975, and it was the first time the legislature banned same-sex marriage. It was actually, I looked at the history of it, it was kind of interesting. It was actually adopted after a clerk in Colorado started granting same-sex marriage licenses, and I guess there was a wave of legislation around the country, and Virginia was one of them. The second statute dates to 1997, which prohibits Virginia from recognizing same-sex marriages from other states. And then in 2004, the legislature passed or amended that legislation to broaden it to civil unions from other states, and also said that the state was not allowed to recognize any contract or obligation that sort of would simulate marriage. This legislation repeals those three statutes. Now, one thing I want to be clear about is this statute does not legalize gay marriage. All it does is takes it out of the code and puts it in the hand of the voters, because the ban exists in two places. It exists both in the code and the Constitution. So we take it out of the code, the Constitution would be what's left standing, and that would be up to the voters to take care of before a judge. So that's what the legislation does. Now, I think it's an important first step that we need to take for a couple of reasons. First of all, just stepping back and looking at it very broadly, what marriage is about is loving, committed couples that want to make a lifelong promise to each other, to take care and be responsible for each other in good times and bad. That's, at its essence, what it's about. And denying people that happiness that comes with being married just seems like a hurtful thing to do to me and to many of my constituents. Virginia is increasingly isolated on this issue. Depending on how you count, there are now 19 states that where gay marriage is now legal. As of January 1, it was about 17. Depends on how you count Utah and Oklahoma, where the court has, two federal judges have acted. But today, there are 6 states where it was legalized by a court, 3 by the vote of the people, and by referendum, and 8 by legislature. Back in 2006, when Virginians were polled about it, and not 2006, but more recently, it was in 2012 when PPP looked at it, public policy polling, 65% of Virginians supported some form of recognition of civil unions in this state. In the last cycle, there was a couple of polls. I think in July of 2013, there was a poll that said gay marriage is now supported by 50% of Virginians. And public opinion is clearly moving very rapidly on this issue as people begin to recognize that maintaining these kinds of bans on the books are simply wrongful. I have 5 reasons, aside from the fact we're isolated, that the state is now isolated, or almost getting isolated, that we ought to also do this. Number one, if we could start getting this stuff off the books, it would save taxpayers a lot of money in litigation, because that's what's coming. Obviously, there's lawsuits that are currently filed. They're going to continue to be filed. In nearly every state, litigation has been filed more recently. It's been unsuccessful. And if we could just take care of this legislatively, we need to continue having our Attorney General's office focused on defending these challenges. In terms of marriage, I think it's also important to note, reason number 2, married couples tend to live longer. Men tend to live about 16% longer, and happily married women live about 27% longer. So there's a lot of good benefits from marriage that you see, and I don't think it depends on whether it's a same-sex marriage or a heterosexual marriage. Marriage is a good thing. Another reason, third reason, is because of foster care and adoption. According to the United States Census that was just taken, there's about, depending on you count, about 20,000 same-sex couples in Virginia. There's about 5,500 kids in foster care. And if only 28% of those same-sex couples were to adopt one child, or say about 14% of those same-sex couples adopted 2 children, we can wipe out the foster care list in Virginia. And giving that relationship recognition would give those children a stable, long-term, permanent home, and it's something that would help to generate further interest in that regard, and I think that would be a benefit to us, to Virginia. Number 4, same-sex marriage actually has significant economic impact. when the state of New Jersey looked at the impact of civil union legislation on their economy, they found that it had about $248 million of positive economic impact, mainly through increased tourism and spending related to weddings, if you can believe that. Also increased tax revenues in terms of marriage license fees. There's some additional money that's freed up when same-sex couples can take the benefit of having going on each other's life insurance. That frees up more money for people to spend on other things, which produces economic activity. And the other thing which generates, which I haven't seen any study look at, but I know the minority leader is very interested in, is it will create a whole new market for gay divorce. He made some comments earlier about his law practice, so I just wanted to make sure he knew that. But in any event, as a practicing divorce lawyer, I mean, the legal industry does have some interest in this. I don't know if the Family Law Coalition is supporting me here or not, but in any event, gay marriage has a positive economic impact that generates tax revenue, and that's a positive thing. And the last thing, and I think it's an important reason, is teen suicide rates. Teen suicide rates are much higher with LGBT children. And I think if society were to take the step to recognize these kinds of relationships, to show that they're accepted in our society, I think it would tend to reduce the number of suicides in our, not just in the state, in the Commonwealth, but also in the country. So those are my reasons. I think I gave you about 6 or 7. But at the end of the day, the United States Supreme Court noted in Loving versus Virginia back in 1967 that marriage is one of the basic civil rights of man. And I think it's time that we afforded that same recognition to same-sex couples.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Surovell. Just real quickly to clarify, if we pass your bill, this will not do anything to change the current status because of the constitutional amendment, correct?
That's my legal opinion.
Okay. And if we don't
I don't
pass,
have to give it the same way as W. Fossey.
And if we don't pass your bill and someday in the future the constitutional amendment was changed, the law would still be in place and there would still be a prohibition against gay marriage and civil unions.
Right. The Constitution goes away and the statute stays the same. We still stay in the same place.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for the patron? All right. Anybody here speak in favor of the bill? Come on up. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you're here with and offer your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Robin Gorsline, Reverend Robin Gorsline. I'm president of People of Faith for Equality in Virginia. We're an interfaith organization, and we speak from a spiritual location. I heard some of what the delegate said, and it's going to be a little different from me. Many of our members are clergy who have stood before an assembly of people in various congregations and proclaimed 2 people joined in marriage. Many have done so with 2 men or 2 women. And for us, the love is the same and the proclamation is the same. We may even say the traditional words, those whom God has joined together, let no one put asunder. Of course, the Commonwealth of Virginia violates that prohibition every week, if not every day, somewhere within the borders of Virginia. You may scoff and say that God has not joined together any same-gender loving couples at this point, because only the Commonwealth of Virginia can empower a clergy person to pronounce words of union. But of course it is not so. God joins people every day. That is how couples, whether they are same-gender or different gender, are brought together by God. And I can tell you that as a pastor for 10 years, I have officiated at the celebration of these marriages in many public ceremonies in the city of Richmond, as have others around our Commonwealth. And I will say this, that the folks in our Commonwealth who indicate and say that God only wants marriage between a man and a woman have chosen to lock up God in a box, and they have thrown away the key. But fortunately, God doesn't work for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and God never got in the box in the first place. God is always on the move and is moving Virginia, as the polls indicate. There's majority support now in the Commonwealth of Virginia for marriage equality. I believe God wants all God's people to be free, and I'm sure we will be. There's also one other matter as a clergy person I want to raise up. and that's the matter of religious freedom. You see, some say that allowing same-gender loving persons to legally marry infringes on the religious liberty of those who think that is wrong. And of course, just the opposite is actually true. The prohibition against marriage of persons of the same sex violates the religious liberty of those whose faith and religious traditions and laws authorize us to perform such marriage ceremonies. We are prevented, and I'm one of them, by law from treating all couples equally, using our experience and training to do the thing that clergy are trained and empowered to do, namely, not to discern the gender of a couple that comes before them, but rather to discern whether the intended marriage is appropriate and ready for our blessing and participation. So I'm grateful, we're grateful from the interfaith equality supporting community, both gay and straight. We're grateful to Delegate Surovell for offering this legislation, and frankly, we know it is only a matter of time before what has really become a plague of intolerance against LGBT Virginians by their government will end. We ask that you join us in the freedom movement by voting for House Bill 939.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the bill? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Bokenkamp. I'm here with Equality Virginia, and I'm speaking on behalf of thousands of our supporters across the state, so thanks for listening today. We believe that all Virginians should have the right to marry the person they love, and for that reason, we fully support HB 939. Virginians recognize that marriage offers numerous benefits, responsibilities, additional financial stability and security, and it would protect our children. Delegate Surovell spoke about a number of those reasons. I won't go into that further. And they both mentioned, according to recent polling, the majority of Virginians are in favor of marriage equality. And unfortunately, the decisions being made at the General Assembly do not reflect where Virginians stand on this issue. Equality Virginia believes that it's time to allow voters to decide if they want to make Virginia a welcoming place for all of our families and businesses. We applaud Delegate Surovell for introducing this common sense legislation, and we urge you to vote yes on this bill and stand on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the bill? Come on up.
Good afternoon. I am Roland Winston, and I'm speaking on behalf of an organization called Get Equal Virginia. It's a state chapter of a national organization that lobbies on LGBT issues. And I want to talk about just some personal families rather than the facts of the matter as have been delivered to you thus far. These are people that I know. One is a lesbian couple. They both have served in the Coast Guard. One of them is no longer in the Coast Guard, and the one that's active duty is stationed at Fort Lee. That may be seen odd, but that's where she is. They have a child that was born since they've been here. They came here from California, but they're from the Northeast. So their family is not recognized in Virginia, but they are family. And so recently on holiday, they went home to Massachusetts and were married. But they're living here now as long as they're employment here. Second family is an Army family. One of them has not ever been in the service, and she's having a tough time looking for a job here and can't activate the services as well. Now she can, as the recent order. These services are available to spouses of military in order to find a job. But the other person's in the Army, and she received transfer orders recently. And they would put them in the middle of the country in a state where she felt like her partner would be not safe. They were married in California before they came here. And so she's actually turned in her notice that she will be leaving the Army, and she's looking for a civilian contractor job. So we might get to keep them for a while if they like Virginia, if we have things change a little bit more. Same-sex marriage is here in Virginia because of Washington and because of Maryland. We have many people here that travel to see their friends, many people that are left here, whose families are still here and come back. The third family I'll mention is two men. One was a teacher, and he's retired from the Richmond Public Schools. They've been married for some time. They've lived in Virginia a long time, maybe life for both of them. But they were married in Massachusetts some years ago. And the one that's retired can't put his partner on his insurance because they're in Virginia. So the marriage is not recommended here, not recognized here. House is on the market. They've already bought property in Maryland. They're leaving the state. So this is an economic issue. It's a personal issue, but it is a family issue. I just need you to understand that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the bill? Anybody here to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Chris Friend of the Family Foundation, asking you to oppose this bill. Delegate Surovell mentioned at the beginning that this issue should be settled by the people and not by the General Assembly, and it has been. It was settled here in 2006 with a vote on a constitutional amendment, with 57% of Virginians supporting this policy. And now we hear about all this polling that supposedly has things different. I do want to read to you a couple statistics. 30 states have adopted the definition of traditional marriage into their constitutions by referenda. That represents about 67% of Americans that have been in states where traditional marriage has been defined. Only about 4.5% of Americans are in states where the citizens have decided to redefine marriage. It's a very small number. In fact, just across the way in Maryland, that was only passed with 51% of the vote on a ballot where Barack Obama won 64%. This clearly is an issue that isn't quite as settled as the proponents of this would like you to believe. I think the people of Virginia have spoken. They've made it very clear about their position on this issue, and I don't see any reason for you to change it at this particular time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the bill? Come on up.
Amanda Jane, Virginia Catholic Conference. Catholic bishops of Virginia are opposed to this bill.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the bill? Delegate Surovell? Anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I'll add is that okay. The only thing I would add. The only thing I would add is, first of all, the constitutional amendment that passed was now 7 years ago, and I think everybody recognizes that if you look at the polling nationally, it's changed pretty significantly in those 7 years, and it's moving very rapidly. And the last thing I want to say is, with respect to this amendment, this statute does not change the Constitution. It doesn't undo what the voters have done, and it doesn't require any church to change anything or to accept anything. It doesn't affect anybody's religious views. It's simply a function. It just simply prepares the state code so that when and if the voters do act, their voice will be honored and not ignored for another 2 or 3 or 4 legislative sessions it gets through to change the law. That's all I want to think.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we're out of microphone, so just holler that you, Doug Toscano. Doug Toscano.
I'm going to move to report this fine measure, and suffice it to say, people will still have their option to speak. What I think Delegate Surovell is asking us to do is to speak ourselves as a legislature in Virginia. Hopefully we can speak in favor of getting rid of this statute.
Right. Sure. So before I hear that, because there may be another motion, include anybody else will say anything they wanted to say, is there anybody else who would like to speak to the motion, excuse me, to the bill, or have any questions for the patron? Okay, Delegate Minshew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Plum has brought a House Resolution 67 as a companion of, I believe, Senator Evans' SJ1. And those are the first filing of the Constitutional Amendment to amend what's referred to as the Marshall Amendment of 2006. My question for the patron would be, why would not that be the right way to attack the issue that's important to you? I understand what your bill does, but it seems to me that if you're really interested in doing what you tell me that you want to do, why would not just a co-patroning or support of Delegate Plum's HJ 67 be, which would be basically an abolition for the voters the chance to take back what they did in 2006. Why wouldn't that be the right approach to get you to vote?
I haven't seen Delegate Plum's bill, but I'm looking it up right now. His bill isn't an abolition. What his bill does is it strikes
it strikes section 15A of the Constitution, and I introduced the exact same bill.
We did.
Yeah, and I was the only proponent of it last session. But it's not an affirmative prohibition on restrictions on gay marriage. It simply removes of the ability for the legislature to recognize gay marriage. There's a big difference. And if that amendment is passed by the voters, this code section, this law will still be in the books. And this has been the law in this state since 1975. And so, from my point of view, if we take this out of the code, then we let the voters decide. And so, to some extent, there is a policy choice here about whether you let the voters decide or whether the legislature ought to decide. Vote for this, lets the voters decide. Following Delegate Plum's approach, ends up leaving the legislature decide. If the voters decide, we get to decide.
And I'll just note, especially those in the audience who may not know, constitutional amendments require passage 2 years of the intervening election. It's the policy of the General Assembly that first read resolutions have to be filed the year of the election. So all constitutional amendments, not just ones related to this issue, but all constitutional amendments on first reading, including Delegate Plum's and Delegate Surovell's, are not being heard this year because this is not a first read year. So I would expect that whatever happens to this bill, we will hear those amendments in P&E committee probably next year. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to speak to the bill? Okay, now I heard a motion to report the bill and to second the bill and second that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, we have a substitute motion. Substitute motion laid on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. That's a non-debatable superior motion. So the motion is to lay the bill on the table. All those in favor of laying the bill on the table say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No. All right,
2 noes?
3.
3?
4 noes.
4 noes?
The ayes have it. The bill is laid on the table. Thank you.